Hey there, I'm Chris Crowell, editor-in-chief of Solar Builder magazine. From upfront design flexibility to long-term reliability, inverter selection can make or break a solar project's economics. Today, we're looking at SMA America's Sunny Highpower PEAK3, the German manufacturer's high-density 1500-volt inverter that will soon be manufactured and skidded in the United States. Here to make the pitch is Senior Application Engineer Hasan and Strategic Markets Manager Tyson Schoelzel. So I wanted to start kind of broadly with what the inverter pain points are for developers and asset owners right now, both in the design stage and kind of over the long term, what you're hearing from your customers out there. Tyson, let's start with you.
I think a key phrase you had in there was right now. There are many, they tend to shift over time, but there are some constant themes. I would boil them down to interconnection. That seems to be a chronic topic that the whole industry is always talking about in multiple segments. How to achieve maximum kilowatt hour yield to the grid, right? How to make money. And then from the long-term asset owner, how can those systems be easily serviced and have the best uptime? Now, we're always hearing from customers about those three things.
And so then with looking directly at a product like the Sunny Highpower PEAK3, Hasan, how can an inverter, and like the one we're talking about today, address those pain points that we just talked about?
Well, I think one of the main ways that the PEAK3 can address those pain points, number one, serviceability, O&M costs. When you look at a centralized architecture, if you're using, say, like one of our Sunny Central inverters, obviously downtime is a huge concern. Say in the unlikely event that a PEAK3 fails, the replacement is going to be a lot easier than, having to wait for us to, say, send out a field service technician to come service the inverter. Maybe you have to wait for additional parts to come out after that. A PEAK3 is going to be just a much simpler process. If you connect your system to Sunny Portal, that's also going to, simplify the O&M process, because then we have visibility of what's going on the site. I think that's probably one of the main ways that the PEAK3 would address those pain points. And
so, Tyson, you mentioned the interconnectability, as a pain point. Does the inverter play into that at all?
Yes, and more. So with the PEAK3, we have all the right certifications, qualifications, and we're listed on all the correct AVLs. But Hasan and his applications engineering team is also very good at supporting one of the prevailing requirements right now, which is a lot of utility models. So whether it's PSCAD or PSSE, SMA has a very deep bench of technical capability to support the customer as they navigate through some of those interconnection hurdles.
Thinking about the specific projects, is there a type of size or application that the PEAK3 is most commonly used now, for one? And then does SMA see more potential beyond where it maybe is currently serving?
For sure. Typically we're seeing the PEAK3 in the 5 to 20 megawatt scale, but because of basically just the modularity of the design, especially say if you're using a skidded, sort of solution with the PEAK3, you can really expand it as large as you want. I mean, we've actually seen systems, I believe, Tyson, we've had a system of 100 megawatts with PEAK3s, just because, that's our typical range, is maybe that 5 to 20 megawatts. I would say to our customers, you're not limited by that.
Community solar has been one of the hot spots. There have been numerous states across the union that offer community solar programs. Some of those programs kind of ebb and flow, and we're seeing a lot of developers broadening to take on the more traditional small utility projects and some other buzzwords, floating voltaics or photovoltaics, agrovoltaics or agro PV. We're seeing a lot of customers really dig into those kind of sub segments of that 2 to 20 megawatt zone.
So as we're thinking about even going to those larger projects, Hasan, you mentioned there was recently you announced the manufacturing partnership with Create Energy, kind of adding a domestic content bonus factor to the PEAK3, but Create will also be skidding the PEAK3. And when you say that PEAK3 achieves a high power density, is that kind of what we're referring to at putting the string inverters on a skid and delivering it to the site like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're referring to. Depending on the, obviously it's going to depend on the power class that you're using, whether it's the 125 or 150. What we're talking about is a virtual central architecture. So you're getting similar or even more, power density, with a skidded solution using our PEAK3s than you would with, say, one, Sunny Central inverter that's, 2.5 megawatts or something like that.
So looking at the spec sheet, there's also, I see a lot of flexibility with the PEAK3. The power classes go from 125 on up to 172, and you can oversize the PV array up to 200% with project-specific DC combiner boxes. There's also the adjustable power output from 52 to 172 kilowatts, flexible AC voltage settings from 200 to 660. I just kind of rattled all those off. I was hoping you could kind of give examples or explain why that adjustability is exciting for project engineers right now.
We enjoy having that wide range of offerings with our PEAK3 125. It was the first and one of very few products in the market at 1500 volts that outputs at 480 volts AC. So we can now use that. And for example, if you have a rooftop with our Core 1 inverter and a carport, you can now use with our PEAK3 and take advantage of some of what we talked about before. Our PEAK3 150 outputs at 600 volts. That's a much more common output voltage to use in a community solar scale site. And then that flex inverter you mentioned with the adjustable output is ideal for repowering. So as our industry matures and we have a lot of older sites that are going to be more and more prone to failures, whether it's the PV modules or something else, but when it's the inverters, when you look at yesteryear, there was a lot of inverters that were built at some pretty odd AC output voltages. So now we're kind of standardized on 480 and 600 and segueing as an industry to 800. But in yesteryear, we saw 385, 405, all these weird voltages. And now you can take our flex inverter and tune it to match the inverter you need to replace. And so what that means is you don't have to tinker with a lot of your AC balance of system, notably the transformer. The moment you touch that transformer, it can trigger restudies. Mm-hmm. And so with our PEAK3 Flex, we can help people achieve a repower at a much lower cost and effort.
And are we seeing the repowering projects as much as I'm hearing about them? I feel like the topic is big, but then I'm always wondering, is it actually happening, or are we just talking about it a lot?
Yes and no. There is a lot of talk. Let's not even ask Hasan how many design reviews he's done in the past month with older systems that he takes a look at this all the time to recommend the best solution. Oftentimes it might be our PEAK3 Flex, but at SMA, we do have product solutions in every segment. When we present that to a customer, one of our goals is to help them achieve, again, that minimal kind of cost and effort, but inevitably there's some cost and effort that's going to go into it. And so there's a lot of hurry up and wait with repowers where, we entertain these all the time, but it's at some point someone's decision to make to pay for, not only the new inverters, but also the crews and engineering and everything else that goes into, upgrading a system. So what we're also starting to see is not just people looking, hey, I got to replace an older inverter that failed, but while I'm at it, let's just rip everything else out and upgrade the whole DC array. So now if you have a system that was built at 600 volts, let's upgrade it to 1500 volts. And we can do that with the PEAK3 Flex.
With the PEAK3, I see a 25-year design life with an optional 25-year extended warranty, which seems like a strong statement. What aspects of the build quality or testing allow SMA to, offer that and stand behind that?
When it comes to the PEAK3, and really all of our inverters, but the PEAK3 really shines in respect to it's built for harsh environments, it's tested for harsh environments, and it's been proven to last and produce in harsh environments. One of the main reasons for that, number one, when you think about what's going to fail on an inverter first, anything that's switching, that's always going to be a component that's going to fail first. So the IGBT, that's where you look at. Our IGBTs are actually overbuilt for what they're asked to do. So obviously the PEAK3, can connect to up to 1500 volts DC. Our IGBTs are actually designed for well over 1500 volts. In reality, there's actually like a 60% design reserve that's built into our PEAK3s. That's basically, we're not taxing them out at 100% all the time. So that's one reason why we say, this thing is built to last 25 years. Also, you probably heard of our OptiCool technology, which is basically our system of internal and external fans that are, keeping components inside the inverter cool so then they can operate longer and, reduce derating. So then you're getting more bang for your buck, even, as ambient temperatures begin to rise. Our OptiCool technology is helping keep that inverter cool so it can keep producing as much power as possible.
Everything Hasan just said enables the PEAK3 to perform not just over a 25-year design life, but at very high ambient temperatures and very high DC-AC ratios, with that confidence that you're going to get full nameplate output up to 52 degrees Celsius or about 125 degrees Fahrenheit ambient temperature for that 25-year lifespan.
That adds to the flexibility that we were talking about on the spec sheet in a way. You're more flexible in where you can, the types of projects you can pursue with the PEAK3. That's good to note.
In the marketplace, there's a lot of 1500 volt string inverters right now. SMA was one of the earlier ones. And what we settled on was a single MPPT architecture. The R&D of these inverters begins several years before it's ever seen in the marketplace. And we settled on the single MPPT architecture for a number of reasons. One of them is reliability. We're proud to say that the PEAK3 150-US-21 model has less than a 1% replacement rate. Mm-hmm. And that's in part achieved from just having fewer components that could fail. In a multi-MPPT inverter, there's a lot more components. The other advantage of a single MPPT inverter is that you can now have a much higher maximum short circuit rating for that single MPPT, whereas a multi-MPPT inverter has, a short circuit rating per MPPT. And so this enables us to work and be much more friendly with high current PV modules, notably bifacial modules. And so on ground mounts, notably, community solar, we're seeing a lot of, desire to use these bifacial modules that get their backside boost and have very high current. And so a single MPPT architecture enables us to help capture as much of that power as possible before we begin current clipping.
Staying on the O&M kind of side of things, can you explain that the value that Data Manager M and the NXOS platform kind of add in here?
What I always tell customers that are, installing our PEAK3, just get a data manager. It's not required, but we strongly recommend it, and it's only going to save you time, money, and heartache in the future. Just get the data manager, connect it to the internet, sign up for Sunny Portal. Sunny Portal is free, by the way. So once you have a data manager connect to the internet, the monitoring portion of it is absolutely free. And what that does for you, not only does it give you remote visibility, it gives you an option to change parameters remotely if necessary. You can see everything that's going on with the inverter in terms of spot values on the AC side and DC side of the inverter. We have something called Analysis Pro, where basically you can see pretty much everything that's going on with the inverter throughout the day, 5-minute intervals of data, where you can see what, was the voltage at this time, were there any errors that happen? If there were errors, you can see the relevant spot values for that error. And not only does it allow you to see that, our service team can see that. Mm-hmm. So when you call the service line and you say, hey, on my site, one of my inverters is down, what's going on? They can go and log on to that Sunny Portal plant and tell you, oh, it looks like it went down because grid voltage got too high at 1205. So, when I say just get the data manager, I really mean it. It's going to save you a lot of time and money in the long run.
And I would add that we have a feature called Smart Connected. So when you register the inverters to our Sunny Portal, you can opt into a program where our service team is now able to take a more proactive stance and alert you to any error codes and suggested corrective measures to fix those. In a worst case scenario, we're also in a position to automate a ticketing process and actually release an RMA unit if that's the case. A second thing that the data manager enables is a lot of advanced grid controls and support. A good example there is we're seeing a lot of customers needing limited or zero export. And so, you know, there might be a slew of different reasons why, but the data manager is key to enabling those features. And again, it doesn't cost much, and it's a great solution to a lot of things.
Yeah, I sense you really emphasizing why would a customer need convincing, because that made a lot of sense to me.
A lot of customers that are operating at the community solar scale have a fleet of projects. They might have fleets of fleets. And so they want an asset management tool. There's a lot of prevailing monitoring systems on the market that, you know, different people will take advantage of and get comfortable with. And you can monitor, you know, not just SMA, but all sorts of other inverter brands as well. And that's all well and good and necessary for that part of their business. But when it comes to troubleshooting and, you know, digging into, you know, any kind of, you know, service related aspect that Hasan has already covered, or those advanced grid support topics that I covered, that's when the data manager is very key and is going to help reduce truck rolls and save money and effort on that service side, which is something we try to make sure the customer understands.
The portion you talked about, Tyson, to opt into, is that a subscription? Is that a paid service?
So Smart Connected is free as well during the warranty period. So if you extend that warranty out to the 25 max, then yeah, you're carrying Smart Connected as an added bonus for that entire duration. And there's really no reason not to opt into it.
As we wrap up here, I mean, what's next for the Sunny Highpower product roadmap overall? Anything you can give me a sneak peek on?
Well, not only do we have the partnership with Create Energy that's introducing the skidded solution, which we're very excited about. That skidded solution in a 2.5 megawatt power block is going to help unlock access to larger and larger system sizes, you know, upwards of 100 megawatts. We're seeing a lot of customers asking for string inverters on 100 plus megawatt projects. And think about why. You know, they might have a sour taste from some of the operational issues that can come with central inverters that are solved by string inverters. The next step after that is we're introducing a storage version of the PEAK3. It's going to be called the Sunny Highpower Storage. We're in the midst of launching it right now. Very similar power classes and AC output voltages that customers are familiar with on the PEAK3 PV inverter. So now they'll have a 1500 volt string storage inverter from SMA as well.
Tyson and Hasan, thank you for taking time today to make the pitch today.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Thank you very much.